What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to discuss some of the highest owned players in FPL right now that are making up some of those template teams you see, and discuss whether they are good picks, are they worth the ownership, or should you be looking elsewhere instead. The team that I'm going to show you is just the highest owned players in each position. It's not necessarily a legit FPL team that you can make, but I think it makes for interesting discussion. So let's get into it. If you have been finding the content useful during pre-season, please do consider subscribing. It takes 2 seconds, it's completely free to do, and I'd love to hit 500k before the end of the season. Let's start with goalkeepers. Kelleher at Brentford is by far the most owned goalkeeper right now, 31.8%. Next in line is Raya at Arsenal, who's 18.1%. At 4.5 million goalkeepers, the next is Verbruggen at 6.8. So Kelleher is super popular. I suspect the fact that he's come from Liverpool helps with that. In the past, though, Brentford keepers have done well for save points and stuff like that. So there is reason to believe he'll get good points at 4.5 million. With Brentford themselves, obviously, they got a new manager. They've lost Norgard in Burmo, probably going to lose Visser as well. There is a bit of upheaval there. We don't know exactly how they're going to react to that. But I think with goalkeepers, it's hard to have a strong opinion that someone is really bad because a lot of the points will come from save points. And like I said, Brentford goalkeepers have been good for that in the past. I think Kelleher is a good shot stopper. So there's every reason to believe that he will do well. The Brentford fixtures aren't amazing, but they're not terrible either. I think he's a good pick. And if I look down the list of 4.5s, I can't sit here and tell you there's definitely a better pick. Like for Verbruggen at Brighton, I don't mind whatsoever. I think Brighton are a pretty strong team. They'll probably finish top half again. Nothing wrong with that at all. But, you know, with a defender like a Forest defender, you might look at the first 6 fixtures and say they're really good. I want one in my team. But with a goalkeeper, it doesn't really work like that. Because if you end up not wildcarding early, then they're in your team for a while. It's just not a position you spend many transfers on. So Verbruggen's fine, but it's not like Brentford's fixtures are any worse. Someone like Petrovic at Bournemouth, I would have looked at him if they hadn't lost pretty much all their defence from last year. Zabani might go, Howson's gone, Kirkes is gone, Keppel is obviously their goalkeeper. There's a lot of change. Now, I don't think Bournemouth are suddenly going to be terrible defensively, but it's a little bit of a concern. But you could look at him if you wanted to, Petrovic. They've got Wolves at home in 2, Brighton at home in 4, Newcastle at home in 5, the away game in 6 is Leeds. Lots of home games and lots of not bad away games in the first 9 weeks. The other player to look at is Jose Sarr. They've got all 3 of the newly promoted sides in the first 9 weeks. So Everton at home in 3 is not bad, but then you've got Leeds at home in 5, Sunderland away in 8, and Burnley at home in 9. So Jose Sarr could be good as well. But I just don't have a strong opinion on whether Kelleher is much worse than any of those goalkeepers I've just listed. So if you want to go for him, why not? I think he's absolutely fine as a pick. Then you've got Raya at 18.1%. He is the cheapest way into that Arsenal backline with security a minute. So Gabriel and Saliba will be there, but they're 6 million. Then you've got Lewis Skelly, Ben White, and obviously Yuri and Timber at 5.5. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly how they're going to line up yet, Arsenal. We'll take a look at the last friendly they play. But could there be some rotation there? Timber can play on the left and right. Ben White obviously plays right back. Lewis Skelly is left back. My gut feeling is it'll be Lewis Skelly and Timber if they're both fit. But Ben White's played a lot during pre-season. It could just be him at right back. So there's risk there. So if you want a defensive player, it's got to be Gabriel Saliba at 6, or you go for 5.5 David Raya. It's a little bit more expensive than maybe I would like to usually start with. But again, if it's a long-term pick, you're backing that Arsenal defence best in the league. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And he might pick up the odd save point here and there. The bonus for goalkeepers is a little bit better now if you make if you make saves from shots in the box. So spending 5.5, nothing wrong with that. Most people don't like doing it. I think it's more viable than most people give it credit. Then you've got the defenders. I think this is really interesting. Wan-Bissaka, 31.4%, the most owned defender in the game. It's worth saying I'm recording this on Friday, so these percentage ownerships might change. Hopefully no one picks up a major injury between when I record this and when it goes live on Sunday. Wan-Bissaka is fine as a pick. I really don't have anything against him. I think he's solid enough. He might pick you up the odd attack and return. Playing as a wing-back, West Ham are setting up in a back 3 in pretty much every pre-season game. There's a lot of talk about Juve on the left side, who's much lower owned. Probably going to be more attacking. I don't mind that. But Wan-Bissaka is solid because it's Sunderland away game week 1 if you want a bench boost. And you know he's absolutely nailed in that team. So it's fine. He's just one of those players that you look at it and think, how is he so highly owned? Like, he's good, but is he 31.4% owned? Good. And I'm going to say that about a few players in this video. So yeah, he's fine. We'll talk about alternative options in a second. Frimpong at 25.9%, I'd be really careful about that pick. If Connor Bradley doesn't have a bad injury to start the season, he's going to get lots of minutes. I don't think Frimpong has been brought in to be the first choice right back week in, week out. I think Connor Bradley's going to get so many minutes if he's fit. Now, he doesn't have the greatest record of staying fit, but if he can, he's going to play. Frimpong is a problem. We've seen Arne Slot talk about potentially using Frimpong as a right winger when Salah goes to African Cup of Nations. He has not been brought in to be the full-time Trent replacement. So unless Connor Bradley has an injury to start the season, I think you have to avoid him. I think it's way too risky. If he does play, lots of attacking potential. I just don't think he's going to get the game time everyone thinks. If I was going for a Liverpool fullback, I would just go for Kirkes instead. Aït-Nouri, I don't know where I sit on this one. 23.5%. Look, he's brought in obviously to play left back. He's not going to be playing centre back or anything like that. He probably will get a good run in the team. In the past, Pep has brought players in and straight away they play the first 6-8 game weeks. Yes, there is Pep roulette and rotation throughout the season, but it doesn't always happen straight away, especially before European matches start. So I think Aït-Nouri will be in the team for game week 1 if he's fit and available. It's just whether or not you're prepared to risk the odd benching. And if you're not, just don't pick him. Otherwise, he's a good option. The safest 6 million is probably Van Dijk, who's 23.3% owned. And if you want a different 4.5 million defender to play every week, then you can look at Konza, who's on the bench in this team as well. Villa's fixtures to start the season are just very good. So Konza's a solid pick, but he doesn't really do that well for defensive contributions. So that might end up leaving him behind, but the fixtures are good enough to start with him because clean sheets are obviously still important. If we're looking at alternatives, as long as he's fit to start the season, which it looks like he will be, Gabriel is another 6 million option if you want to back that Arsenal defence. I do look at those fixtures and think for the first 6 weeks, maybe this is the time we could ignore Arsenal. Man United away in 1, Liverpool away in 3, Man City at home in 5, and Newcastle away in 6. Don't get me wrong, right? Man United is not as difficult a fixture as it once was many, many years ago, but I can still see them scoring. So you're really hoping for points. Leeds at home, Forest at home in 2 and 4. Now he can go and get you attacking returns as well. I really don't think Gabriel's a bad pick. I just think if you're looking short term, I'd maybe go elsewhere. But as a long term pick, he is great. The fixtures for Arsenal get much better game week 7 onwards. Then you've got 5.5s, defensive contribution monsters, Tarkowski and Murillo. Don't underrate defensive contributions this season. They will be important and they will let players tick over with consistent points. Tarkowski averaged 10.79 defensive contributions per start last year. You only need 10 to hit the +2 points, and Murillo was 10.5. So you could argue that going for one of them over a Gabriel and spending 0.5 elsewhere could be a pretty nice way to start the season. If it was a long-term pick, I think I prefer Tarkowski because I think Everton defence will be better than Forest. But short-term, first 6 weeks, Forest have got pretty good fixtures every week apart from game week 4. So short-term Murillo, longer-term Tarkowski. Nico Williams is also a cheaper alternative into that Forest defence. He's not going to get you as many consistent defensive contribution points, but he will chip in with them and he's a bit more attacking than Murillo. And then if you want a different 4.5 than Wan-Bissaka or Konza, I've already mentioned Juve, who's going to be very popular this week. I think when you watch different people's videos and listen to podcasts and stuff like that. You've got Gay at Crystal Palace, 4.5. I am a little bit more keen to go for Richards because he's slightly better for defensive contributions. The problem is Palace have been linked with a new centre-back. I think Lacroix and Gay are nailed. If they bring in a new centre-back, what happens to Richards' minutes? Richards is going to start the season. I've got no issues with that whatsoever. But maybe longer term, he's a bit more of a risk. And I don't think he's so much better than Gay that it's worth taking that risk. And he's obviously nailed. Joachim Andersen have got some nice home fixtures early on. Man United at home in 2 is not bad. Leeds at home in 4. Brentford at home in 5. He's amazing for defensive contributions as well. 9.43 average per start last season. And Fulham's defensive numbers were very good. They were a top 5 defence in terms of expected goals conceded. If they can keep that up, we might see more clean sheets from them this year. And then you got Van der Ven. The closer we get to the deadline, the bit more worried I am about him because he is a little bit injury prone. And I don't know if he's going to be great for defensive contributions. And I guess between him and Romero, he's a little bit more risky for minutes, although I do think he's probably going to be nailed as that centre-back partnership. But the fixtures are good for Spurs. Burnley at home in 1. City away in 2 is tough, but then Bournemouth at home, West Ham away, Brighton away, Wolves at home. The thing with Spurs is, you've really got to hope they improve massively over last year, because last year defensively they were awful. Like, I think they were bottom 5 for expected goals conceded. How much can Thomas Frank really improve them? Like, people will talk about him setting up in a pragmatic way against top teams and stuff like that, but Brentford defence has never been that good. Like, goalkeepers pick up a lot of save points, but their expected goals conceded under Thomas Frank just not that great. Now, at Spurs, they got a better squad, so you would hope those numbers would improve, but there is some worry there. So Van de Ven on paper looks amazing, but I don't think he's as good as maybe people are making out. That being said, he might still make my final squad. There's loads of defenders to pick from, but they're some of the best options if you want to differentiate from some of those template picks. Don't forget, if you do make any changes to your team based on this video, or just what happens over the weekend, you want to get your new team rated for free, you can do so on the My Team tool over on Fantasy Football Hub, link in the description below, or scan that QR code on screen. And as always, it's really nice because you can just upload a screenshot of your most recent team. So I'm going to upload one with both Frimpong and Aït-Nouri, and I'm just going to save that and then optimize it and change it to 1 game week only. And that comes out a 92% team rating, which is a little bit lower than my recent drafts. Not bad, but maybe not quite as good. And I think that's because there's some concerns over players like Aït-Nouri and Frimpong, but also because I've put in Paquetá, who I don't think is very popular within the FPL community, but not a bad pick at 6 million. Anyway, if you've got a better draft, make sure to get it uploaded using a screenshot of your team on the My Team tool, link in the description below, or scan the QR code on screen. So in midfield, it's no surprise to see that Mohamed Salah is the most owned player, 57.3% ownership. To be fair, we have seen players go past the 60 and 70% ownership mark. I think Haaland did that a season or two ago. So the price has kept his ownership down a little bit, but he's still super popular. And I'm sure if you polled everyone that was watching this video whether they had Salah, his ownership's probably more like 70, 80%. There's not really any good reason I can give you to not at least consider him. Like, he broke the points record for the second time last year. He's not going to score that many points again, right? Primarily because he's going to African Cup of Nations this year. There will be some drop-off, but he'll still probably be worth that price point, especially when you factor stuff in like captaincy. If I was playing devil's advocate, Liverpool have got a lot of new players. Ekitike's come in, Vert, so that's your 9 and your 10. Gakpo on the left is consistent. Salah on the right is as well, of course. Right back, Frimpong, if he's going to play. Kerkez on the left. And these are good players, of course. They can adapt. Right? I'm not expecting Liverpool to be terrible. Maybe there will be some transition period at the start of the season. The thing is, you've got to be really sure about that to back against Salah. So it's quite a difficult case to be made. So I just think he's great. And I prefer him to Haaland to start the season. I think that 0.5 million difference is not enough for me to go Haaland instead. But absolutely, of course, Haaland could do amazing. We could be sat here in 6 weeks' time saying, well, of course we should have gone with Haaland. Look what he's done in previous seasons. So Salah's good, as you might expect. There are maybe some reasons to think about going against him, but not many I can think of. Palmer is not that far behind, 53.5% ownership. I think the Club World Cup is doing a lot of heavy lifting for game week 1 squads, basically. I think he played so well against PSG in the final that everyone's kind of put him in. If you go back to my videos at the end of last season when I had Cole Palmer in my team, people were talking about him like he couldn't play football. There's no way I'm going to have him in my team. He's got to have a price drop. So many comments like that. He's come in at the same price this year and he's over 50% owned. Ultimately, for me, it's a bit like Salah versus Haaland. Palmer versus Saka. Saka might lose penalties. The fixtures are worse. And it's only 0.5 million difference. So for that reason, starting with Palmer just looks pretty good. Again, if I was playing devil's advocate, Chelsea have not had a proper pre-season. Now, this is another thing that's difficult to assess because ultimately we haven't had this before where they've gone and played a club tournament in the summer. So we don't know how players will react. It might be that Chelsea are a little bit fitter than everyone else because they've played competitive matches more recently. It could be that the team is knackered and that has a big impact. So I don't think Cole Palmer is essential by any means, but I do think at 10.5 million, he is capable of doing big things in that Chelsea team. He's already had over 200 points twice in his first 2 seasons. He can do it again. He's an extremely good player. And I'm telling you now, there's a good chance next year he'll be more expensive than 10.5. Wirtz is probably still my favourite 8.5 million midfielder. Lots of love for him. 33% ownership. You can definitely make a case for Marmoush instead if you're willing to risk possible rotation. But Wirtz is going to come in, good minutes, in that number 10 role. I just don't see him being rotated whatsoever. He's come with a lot of hype, lots of money as well. There's big expectations on him. You could argue Liverpool's fixtures to start, Newcastle away in 2, Arsenal at home in 3, not great. But I don't think they're that bad overall. And there's a lot of reasons to like him at 8.5. We'll come on to alternatives in a second. Again, the only devil's advocate position on Wirtz is he's new to the league. So will that make a difference? Will he find it hard to adapt? I just think there's some players that can just play anywhere. I think Wirtz is probably one of those. And as much as Liverpool have made a lot of new signings, they're still an amazing team, right? One of the best in the league. So I think Wirtz is just a good pick at 8.5. Maybe there's a case to be made that you drop down to a 7 or a 6.5 and put that money into defence or your forward line. But if you've got Wirtz in your team, it's a decent enough option, right? Kudus is 25.6% owned. I think a lot of this ownership is from when the game first launched. There was a lot of hype around him. People could not believe he was only 6.5 million. I thought the hype at the time was a little bit overblown. Not to say he's a bad option, but I don't think he's quite as good as everyone is making out. But I think he will be pretty nailed in that Spurs team. That right wing position will be his. I think although he didn't do great at West Ham last year, he was playing a lot on the left, not necessarily in his favourite position. So that will help. We know how well Thomas Frank has got Brentford attacking. Can he do that for Spurs as well? But they've got problems, right? James Maddison is out for the season. They don't really have a number 10 right now because Kulusevski's not there as well. Solanke didn't feature in the last pre-season game at the time of recording. It's not all rosy at Spurs either. So I think Kudus is good at 6.5, but I'm not sure he's worth all the hype that happened when the game launched. Like his underlying numbers in terms of goal threat and assist threat have never been amazing in the Premier League so far. That might change at Spurs, and they've got good fixtures, so I don't mind him as a pick, but don't feel like you have to have him in your team. And then the midfielder on the bench is Rodgers, 24.4%. At the time of recording, he went off with an injury in the last Villa game, but they've said it's not that bad, and he'll probably be available for game week 1 against Newcastle, so obviously keep an eye on that. I think Rodgers is great for 7 million, primarily because the Villa fixtures are so good to start the season. And for the first 7 game weeks, you just put him in and leave him. Maybe his minutes will go down a little bit this year. They've signed Gesand, etc. They've got Marlon there as well. But he was so consistent last year. I don't think anyone in that Villa team does what he does. I think he'll start every game that he's fit for. In terms of alternatives, if you want to spend a bit more than Wirtz, you've got Bruno Fernandes. I've talked about him a lot in pre-season videos, so I won't go through it again. But consistent player, if you want someone you just put in your team and leave because they'll always play, never get injured, got penalties, he's the one. But I think there are concerns there. Because if Šeško has come in, which he probably will have by the time you watch this video, Mbeumo and Cunha are going to play 10s. He's going to play as a central midfielder more often. And that's going to limit his attack and returns, I think, a little bit. So I'm not completely convinced by him as a pick, but he is pretty consistent generally. Marmoush I already mentioned. If you're willing to risk possible rotation, the fixtures are good. And for what it's worth, I see a world where Marmoush starts the first 6. So I think there's reason to believe that he's a good punt for the start of the season. If you don't want to go for Rodgers at 7 million, I like Semenyo much more than Pedro Neto, as you would have seen if you watch my recent videos. 7.5, Gibbs White's got good fixtures to start. Eze as well, if he's definitely staying at Palace. But Semenyo after Liverpool away, the fixtures are good. He always plays. His goal threat is decent as well. Definitely one to watch. If you don't want Kudus at 6.5, then Njai is pretty much a nailed-on penalty taker at Everton. I will say, though, he's been in and out of my drafts. He's super underwhelming in terms of stats from open play. 0.22 expected goal involvement per 90 last year with no penalties. It's pretty rubbish. Now, he does have penalties, and the fixtures are good. So for that reason, I think he's a good pick for game week 1. But maybe this is the time where I go against a penalty taker for once, which doesn't happen that often. Also, Everton keep getting linked to Jack Grealish. Now, if he comes in, surely he's going to get minutes. That will be on the left side. You'd think that Njai will just play number 10, but they've also brought in Dewsbury Hall as well. And in their last friendly against Man United, they played with Garner as the 6. I saw the Everton correspondent on Planet FPL talk about this. Garner as a 6, and then Idrissa Gana Gueye ahead of him with, I can't remember who the other player was, but whoever the other player was, that's where Dewsbury Hall would play. So it's not even guaranteed they will play with an out-and-out number 10. So maybe Njai goes to the right. Maybe he's ahead of Grealish in the pecking order. All it boils down to, the more and more players that Everton sign in attack, the more likely it is that Njai's minutes get reduced. I don't think he's a 90-minute man every single week. So he's good because he will get the odd defensive contribution point, but not that many, and he's on penalties. But I'm slightly going off him the more we get closer to the game week 1 deadline. I do like Sarr though. He put up really good attacking numbers last year. 0.59 expected goal involvement per 90. That's the best on this list. Better than Marmoush, better than Bruno Fernandes. Now, that is an outlier. He hasn't done that before. But there's no reason he can't get close to that again in that Palace team this year. They do have Europe this year. That might be a problem. But after Chelsea away, I think Forest at home, Villa away, Sunderland at home and West Ham away is pretty good. So as a short-term pick with good attacking numbers, bearing in mind Palace have looked pretty ready to start the season, right? They're playing with their first choice team quite a lot. They're not still trying to get in a bunch of attackers like Everton are. I think Sarr is underrated, and I think his ownership's super low at 2.3%. Tielemans at 1.7 if you don't want to go for Rodgers. He's nailed on. He's got a small amount of attacking threat, a small chance of getting defensive contribution points, outside chance of getting penalties. Not bad for 6 million, but he's the kind of pick you just put in and you have to leave. So if you want a more defensive-minded player, then Tielemans could be the one, and he's a bit cheaper. But I really like Anderson. He averaged 11.85 defensive contributions per start last year. You need 12 as a midfielder. He's going to pick up those points quite a lot. He's on some set pieces. He has some attacking threat, although it's a minimal amount, and the fixtures are good. I think for 5.5 million, Anderson is great value, and you could even play him every single week. But I will say this. Some of the choices you make in FPL, they've got to be so that you're happy with your team. And I don't think most people will be happy playing a more defensively minded player in Anderson in terms of wanting those defensive contribution points every week. So avoid that if you can. But I do think it's viable, and he's definitely a good bench option if you want to spend a bit more. So I think the forwards are really interesting this season. We've had a lot of new signings already, like João Pedro at Chelsea, Ekitike at Liverpool, Gyökeres at Arsenal. By the time you watch this video, Šeško will probably be a Man United player. But it still feels like there's a lot of movement to happen. Wissa wants to leave Brentford. Will he end up at Newcastle? Will Isak leave Newcastle and go to Liverpool? Nicholas Jackson apparently is going to leave Chelsea. We don't know where he's going to go yet. Will he stay in the Premier League? If he does, he's only 6.5 million. It's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on the transfer market over the next week. It could drastically alter how we set up our forward lines. Right now, the most owned players, João Pedro at 52%, Isak at 27.5%, and Gyökeres at 23.6%. João Pedro, I've basically said the same thing all throughout pre-season. He's good, but is he 52% own good? I think when a player has that high ownership, they're almost pushing towards conversations around being essential, and I just don't think João Pedro is that player. I think there's a lot of attackers in that Chelsea team. If Nicholas Jackson's going to leave, then that is one less competition for his place in that number 9 role, and I do think that he will start ahead of Delap in most games. So for that reason, I think he's decent. The early subs are definitely a possibility. He's not going to have penalties ahead of Palmer. He's good at 7.5. I'm finding it really difficult to think that he's just this amazing 52% ownership pick. And that's not to say that I won't start with him, because I might. Nicholas Jackson leaving, like officially leaving, will be a big thing to think about. I just think for the same money, like Solanke's obviously not really an option right now because he's not playing in pre-season, but Chris Wood's got really good fixtures first 6, should be nailed on to start and on penalties. You know, Mateta, we know what we get from him in that number 9 role. Like, João Pedro hasn't always been a number 9. Like, he can also play number 10, which is obviously good because there's other ways into that Chelsea team. But if Maresca decides to play Delap in one game, it doesn't guarantee João Pedro will still be in the 11. And I just don't think Delap is going to permanently sit on the bench. So I go back and forth with João Pedro. I think he's good. The ownership, I think when you see a player high owned, it should make you think, have you got something wrong? And that's what I keep thinking. So many people have him. What am I not seeing that he's just that good? So I don't know. Maybe I'll end up with him, but he's not been in any draft of mine so far. Isak, for me, at the time of recording, is an absolute ignore. He's not training properly with the Newcastle team. Presumably, right, if he's not going to Liverpool, they'll get him into that side sooner rather than later. Right? He could start game week 1. But I don't think it's impossible that he misses out right now, even if he's still at Newcastle. And if he goes to Liverpool, that's great. The problem you have is if you pick him at the start and he doesn't start game week 1 for Newcastle and then he moves to Liverpool, would he definitely start that first game for Liverpool? And what I mean by that is, right, let's just say there's a scenario where Isak signs for Liverpool on a Thursday or a Friday ahead of game week 2. You know, he's not necessarily going to go straight into the side. It could be Ekitike plays, Isak comes off the bench, then Isak starts the week after. For me, Isak is 10 10.5 million, almost forgot how much he was then in FPL. I want way more clarity on my player for that kind of money. I want to know for sure he's going to start wherever he is in game week 1. We don't have that right now. That ownership has to drop. Isak for me is not a pick right now. Gyökeres, I spoke about on my video the other day about being wrong, and obviously he's a better pick than Watkins, etc. I still don't agree with that. I need to see the final Arsenal pre-season game, which unfortunately I think is going to happen after I've recorded this. If he starts that game and Havertz is injured for the beginning of the season, then Gyökeres is going to start in game week 1, and I like him a bit more. But I'm telling you now, if Havertz is fit and available, he could get used by Arteta in that first game. That's what puts me off. I do think Gyökeres will get penalties, but that's not a guarantee. And ultimately, you know what you're getting from Watkins. He could be on penalties as well, and the fixtures are better. Now, there has been some speculation around Watkins' future over the summer, but right now there's nothing really concrete. So I think he will be at Villa, and I'm not convinced they're going to sell him. But there are rumours going around that he's open to leaving and maybe going to like a Newcastle or something like that if they stump up enough cash. So Watkins is not without risk, but I think if he stays at Villa, he's a better pick to start the season than Gyökeres. And remember, if you don't start with a player, you are allowed to bring them in later on. So don't panic, right? If you don't start with Gyökeres, you can get him later. In terms of alternatives, Watkins I've just spoken about. Bowen is an interesting one because he's 20.1% owned, but he very rarely gets talked about. I think he's a solid option at 8 million. You know exactly what you're getting from him. He's very consistent. The fixtures aren't bad to start the season from an attacking point of view. He probably won't have penalties. I think that'll be Paquetá instead if he stays. But he's all round just a solid pick. He'll get you some assists. He'll get you plenty of goals. I like Bowen at 8 million. If you're the kind of manager that wants to put someone in you never have to worry about, he plays 90 minutes every single week. At 7.5, if you don't want João Pedro, Mateta looks good for the start of the season. Chelsea away in 1, Liverpool at home in 6 is not great, but the middle 4 fixtures are good. And his minutes should be great because Nketiah has picked up, I think, a hamstring issue and is going to be out for a few weeks. So last season, when some of us went Sarr and Eze and others went Sarr and Mateta, Eze won out quite a bit because Mateta didn't do well and he kept getting subbed early. That shouldn't happen at the start of the season. Now, there are rumours that Eze might leave still, and that would affect the Palace attack, but I think Mateta's a good pick at 7.5. I think arguably he's on a par with João Pedro. Like João Pedro 50% owned, Mateta 6.3. It's not even that I'm saying João Pedro is definitely a worse pick. I just think the ownership should be a bit closer to reflect what they are as FPL picks. But again, what do I know anyway? Chris Wood should be nailed. Maybe there's a bit more threat to his minutes now. They've got Jesus in, so they've got another forward that can play out there. They've still got Awani as well. Maybe he'll get more game time. But ultimately, he should start the season. The minutes should be pretty good, although they do have Europe this year, and he's on penalty, so I don't mind Chris Wood at all. Evan Nielsen, keep an eye on him, because Kluivert is not featuring in pre-season. And if Kluivert is injured to start the season, someone else needs to take penalties, and I'm pretty convinced it'll be Evan Nielsen. Liverpool away is a rubbish fixture in game week 1, but then you've got Wolves at home, Spurs away, Brighton at home, Newcastle at home, Leeds away. He's only 2.5% owned. His goal threat from open play is 0.45, non-penalty expected goals per 90. Very similar to Watkins, better than Bowen, better than Mateta, better than Chris Wood. So if you add penalties to that, and he's 7 million, so he's 0.5 cheaper than João Pedro and Mateta would, definitely someone to consider. 6.5, my favourite option is Strand Larsen, probably 5.9% owned. I'm hoping he'll get penalties at Wolves. I think Danny Welbeck at the same price is arguably better because the fixtures to start the season are better for Brighton. My main issue is I think Strand Larsen is probably going to be a little bit less injury prone. And maybe I'm overplaying this a bit, but we have seen multiple times in the past, Hertzler is not forthcoming with injury news. So if a player is injured and he gets asked about it, he'll talk about it. But if Welbeck had a small knock and was going to miss a game at the weekend, he wouldn't necessarily let you know. Much less so than other managers. And that does put me off a little bit. And then at 6, I still like Thiago. I think Visser will leave. There is rumours, again, at the time of recording, that Dango Utara from Bournemouth might join them. But I think he'll play in one of the wide positions. I don't think he's being brought in to play number 9. Thiago is not without risk, right? He had a big injury last year. And we still don't know if this is definitely going to leave. But I'm pretty confident Thiago starts game week 1. He's 6 million. I hope he'll be on penalties as well. Not a bad pick. The 5.5s, Muniz should start the season as number 1 for Fulham. Peru should start the season number 1 for Leeds. Long term, you can't guarantee their minutes. Anyway, That's the template team in terms of the highest owned players. I appreciate there's 4 Liverpool players in there. The budget is too expensive, etc. But it's good to talk about these players. What have people got right? What have they maybe got wrong? And to discuss other options. So let me know how many of these players are in your team. Which ones will you back against? Which ones are you considering? Leave a comment below. If you want to get your team rated for free, use the link in the description below or scan that QR code on the screen. Completely free to get your drafts rated on the My Team Tour Fantasy Football Hub. Hit subscribe, hit like, and I'll catch you again tomorrow for another video.